Right
Well,
on.
hey, this is Mike Layton from Stochastic Marketing, and I have the benefit of having Darren Dixon on the phone with me today, and he is one of the guys that I would consider one of the sort of original gangsters, if you will, of the industry. Darren, I just want to thank you for taking the time to share maybe some of your experiences in HVAC and plumbing with our listeners who may not have met you in person.
Well, I'm happy to be here, and you just aged us both when you said we're talking on the phone, because we know we're not talking on the phone, Mike. We're talking over the internet, Mike.
Yeah, yes, you're right. And we don't have candles to light the office either. But, we've known each other for about 15 years now.
That's right.
And at that time, you were really one of the first guys that I had met who had started, grown, and then sold a contracting business to a national group. And that was when I was just first to know the industry at all. How did you first get into the HVAC industry?
Well, just to clarify a little bit, I was actually recruited into the industry when I was in my young 20s. I was living in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I had not gone to college, and I was still kind of, I was in that delay mode of, well, I'll go to college, next year, and the next year never came. I just was working. Anyway, long story short is I was married, and I had one child already and another child on the way, and I was realizing that it's a lot more expensive, man, to take care of a family than I had anticipated. So I was working 3 jobs, and just to kind of make ends meet. My wife was going to college at the time, and I was recruited by a guy named Jeff Stewart, who became a really great friend and early mentor in my life. And he actually came up to me one day. We were at church, as a matter of fact, and he came up to me and he goes, what do you do for work? And I said, here's where I was working at the time. I was like, I have 3 jobs. Which one do you want? He said, well, how would you like to come to sell air conditioners for me and make tons of money? And I mean, that was literally exactly what he said.
Wow.
I don't know if he'd rehearsed that or how long it had taken him to get to that point, but that's literally what he said. And I only had one question. I said, well, what's tons of money? And he said at the time to me, well, I don't have anybody that works in this capacity that makes less than $50,000 a year. And so, we're talking about 1995, right? So I remember thinking to myself,
yes, $50,000 1995, right?
Right? I'm like, $50,000 with one job? I'm like, man, I will have arrived. So I said yes before I even really knew what it was going to entail. But I did. I took the job, and one of the first things that happened was they sent me to sales training, and they sent me to Houston, Texas, to get some training at this place called Future University. And so that's where I went, and I was introduced to selling air conditioning systems to homeowners in a 3-day course called the $1 Million Salesperson. So that's how I got started. It wasn't
So is he the guy who influenced you the most in your first 5 years? Sounds like it. Or was it a sales trainer?
Well, I think that the person that actually influenced me the most in my career at the time was Tom Hopkins. Because
the great tapes that we all good salesmen used to drive around listening to him, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The perfect Christmas gift, Tom Hopkins, set, right? So, but I remember I was willing to do the job because I wanted to make the money, but I was not willing to be what I considered to be a typical or stereotypical salesperson, pushy, obnoxious, That wasn't going to be me. I wasn't going to be that guy that was going to ask the customer 7 different times, to be real pressured. And so when I was introduced to Tom Hopkins at that very first training that I went to, I watched a video of Tom Hopkins. I was like, that's how I want to sell. And so I would say that as far as my development of skill, it definitely was Tom Hopkins. Now, Jeff Stewart was also a very important person in this to me because, Mike, I almost left the industry. Like, I think I'd been selling for about 3 years, and I did not see it as my long-term career. I saw it as an interim move between where I was and what I really wanted, which what I really wanted at the time was I wanted to be an attorney. And so I had my plan on how I was going to get that done. But when I stopped and really reflect and realized that at this time now I was, right after starting, I was already making $75,000 a year doing it. I was like, that's kind of hard to walk away from. And
particularly with a couple of kids, right?
Yeah, right. Yep. And it was Jeff Stewart that actually said, hey, listen, don't leave the industry because, I see you as my exit plan in this company. And that's when everything changed for me. That's when everything changed for me, and my focus and my effort and my I always worked hard and I always did a good job. I was a successful salesperson, $1 million salesperson when the average sale was $4,000.
Right.
You can do
right.
the time value of money on that today.
Right.
Ran marketed leads for a few years, but it wasn't until I realized on that conversation that Jeff shared with me that I was going to be able to achieve my dreams right here in this industry. And so I'm really thankful for him, and I'm really thankful that I listened because from there, I've had a really great career in this industry and have had the opportunity to meet a lot of awesome people like you and others that have, been around this and what we're doing for a long time. And it's pretty fascinating to me, really, when you start to think about the industry. And last week week before I was I was speaking at an event for an individual that I think is top-notch dude named Jason Walker. I don't know if you know Jason. If not, I need to introduce you. Yeah. So Jason, I think Jason is a top-notch guy, and he's he's in that younger group of up-and-coming strong entrepreneurs in the industry that he really he's very Jason is a very solid individual, and I like him. Anyways, I was speaking at an event that he had a couple weeks ago, and I was talking about the industry and where the industry's at today, and then I had the opportunity to sit back and listen to all of the training that was going on in this event.
Mm-hmm.
And I literally felt like I was sitting in a training 20 years ago hearing the exact same words. I mean, it was the exact same words. It was, here's the words not to say. Here's where you park. Here's how you, interact with the customer.
Here's how you stand. Here's how you look people in the eye. Here's what you do.
Exactly.
Let them talk first. Right. All this Tom Hopkins 101, Brian Tracy, it's still classic. Still the same
stuff. And then you bring in all the stuff that we taught in our organization, right? So eventually our company, I guess we should try to keep a timeline here so that I'm not jumping around and confusing people, but ultimately the point is that the industry training and what it takes to actually succeed in this industry is exactly, I realize it's exactly the same as it was then. It has not changed up until now, right? So right now, the same exact strategies that we were using to succeed then are the exact same strategies being taught and used today. But
so what are the advantages to today's evolving industry leaders have compared to 30 years ago? Is it they're able to access people like yourself who have that experience from 1995 to 2005 to 2015. You've got a few decades now where the industry has transformed from, like you said earlier, originally it was kind of a service industry, then it was a replacement. So, what advantages do they have as they look forward? You can look back 30 years. These guys need to look forward. What's the future hold for the Jason Walkers of the world? Right.
Well, so there's a lot of questions in that question. There's a lot of answers in that question.
Right.
So
right.
Let me just see if I can kind of distill it, and if I miss anything, then don't move on. So, first of all, I don't see that there are any advantages to the original group that the young guys don't have now. Realistically, we stand on each other's shoulders, right? So I stood on Jim Abrams' shoulders. Plenty of people have stood on my shoulders. Now people who are stood on my shoulders have people standing on their shoulders. So But the thing is what I found is that all they're doing is getting there faster. So if you think about the way that
I'd agree.
Okay, they don't have to make the same mistakes. There's more known, right? So we are able to say, hey, look, here's exactly how to get this done. But that's had some negative impacts on the industry, and I think that we should talk about those too, because I always go back to this Jurassic Park reference when they say just because we could doesn't necessarily mean we should have, right? So, and I know that sounds a little like cryptic, like what does that have to do with our industry? But if you think about it, there are certain aspects of the financial metrics built into this industry that have created some of the problems that we're also now dealing with in the industry. So when there were a handful of companies that really knew, a handful of guys that really knew how to do this, right? And they'd build these large regionals, and then there would be people who'd study them and copy them, and some of them were in their marketplace, and so it became more of the way. So what I think I've seen over the last 15 years is that there's an adaptation curve of when early information is received, understood, and executed upon, and you give that enough time, then there are other individuals that are able to watch and learn and see what that's doing, and so they become believers in doing it themselves, and now all of a sudden, the basis for how what we used to consider to be the secrets that we use to grow our businesses, they're not secrets anymore. So you see it becoming a much more common way of doing things. I mean, for there to be as many companies as there are now that are able to go out and, start up a business and grow to, $5 million in the first year and $10 or $15 million in the second year and $20 million by the third year. I mean, that is, we're still using the time value, we're still using the dollar amount of volume and comparing it back to the old way and saying to ourselves, oh my God, that's like incredible. But if you think about the fact that the average sale today, because of cost increases, specifically with labor and goods and materials and equipment, it's effectively somewhere around 3 to 3.5 times what it was before. So
yeah, it's you're exactly right. A $4,000 system when you started is $16,000 $12 now. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, all over the country.
Right. So when you think about a business, our business there was in 2005 it did $17 million. So if you think about that, I mean, I think our average sale at the time was somewhere around $6,000 now. So if you think about that, Mike, I mean, the average sale only changed to like $2,000 over that period of time. A lot of what's happened to the industry really came because of factors and minimum SEER ratings and et cetera, greater technology.
Right.
But if you take a $17 million business then and you say that that's like having a $50 to $60 million business today, then you can go, okay, well, man, that was a pretty scaled up business without the access to all the technology, and we had no mobile anything. We didn't have the internet helping us in those days and whatnot. There was no such thing as the iPhone. So, what I see today is I see that the exact same skills are being used to get what we were doing then. We're just getting it faster because it's a known solution and there's more people doing it. But the industry itself has not actually truly changed over the last 15 years. It really hasn't. I mean, the exacerbation of some of the problems that I see now are coming because of this new way of doing things. And
what's harder than 30 years ago? What's harder than 30 years ago? Because you're right, the softwares, you have a workflow, Service Titan or other House Call Pro, whatever it is. Everything's kind of automated, right, all the way down to paperless out in the field, which you didn't have in 1995, obviously. But what's harder today than 20 years ago for the guys who have a $5 or $10 million business?
I'm not sure that. I'll tell you this. I think what's getting harder is the ability to get consumers through some of the older channels that were used. And remember, there was no pay-per-click then, right? So, I mean, we were using phone book ads, we were using newspaper ads, and we were using direct mail, and we were using radio. And radio really didn't do anything for us. We didn't crack the code on radio until probably, 10 years ago, when we really cracked the code on how we could use radio for direct response advertising. But, this idea that, it's so hard to get a technician today and that there's this big, massive shortage of labor and all this, that's no different than it's always been. I mean, it's always...
Slow down, because that's where I was going to. Okay. Everybody, I hear it all day long about labor. Tell us your perspective on how that's no different than 30 years ago.
Well, we have, so what a lot of guys are saying, there's this massive labor shortage. Well, let's just get clear about what a labor shortage really means. Just because people don't want, and first of all, you got to ask yourself, why is there, if there's a labor shortage, how is it defined and why does it exist? So let's just unpack that for a second and challenge me on anything that you think that I'm just talking out of my ass about, okay? So number one, we've always had a hard time getting qualified people, okay? Always. It's just always been that way. But now what you find is that there is this reported massive labor shortage that is defined in many cases by how many positions there are open positions in North America for this job. So in other words, if there are 86,000 jobs unfilled and open in the HVAC professional service representative job category, it doesn't mean that there's a labor shortage of 86,000 people. It means that there are companies that are trying to hire 86,000 technicians, that 86,000 technicians are not leaving where they're at to go to work there. So when you really start talking about, is there a labor shortage, you have to ask yourself, what about the proportionate distribution between supply and demand? Is there a massive disproportionate distribution between supply and demand? If that was the case, then you would know it. You'd see consumers who are sitting around for weeks at a time not being able to get a service tech to their house. And that's not the case. So what's really going on is that we've taught contract,
That's a good way of looking at it, right? Show me where it's not like a supply chain issue we're having now in the industry where I can't get parts or I can't. I mean, you can get someone in your house tomorrow anywhere in America.
Absolutely. It's you can get someone in your house today anywhere in America. It's just a disproportionate distribution between supply and demand. So we've taught contractors how to become wildly profitable. They have 10x more money than their competitors do, which they can turn around and devote to basically a monopoly, if you will, of the current channels of distribution of customer acquisition. And so they don't understand sophisticatedly enough how to use the right amount of marketing to fill today's opportunity bucket. They market so that they are number one on the page or as often as possible, and that amount of demand that it's bringing in, they don't have enough technicians to fulfill. So they're trying to hire more technicians, but it doesn't mean there's a labor shortage. They just have a deficiency in the ability to attract technicians to their companies. All right, now why? Why? If in fact if I'm the biggest guy in town and I have the best trucks and the most money and the coolest building and the best parties and all that stuff, then why still is this such an issue? And I'll tell you why. Because it's the job category itself of what it means to be a technician in those companies that the biggest portion of the technician pool is rejecting. Right? How's that job category changed? I mean, realistically, if you want to make, and again, like I said, Mike, this is my perspective. If you disagree, challenge me at any time, or anybody that wants to challenge me on this, I'm open to a dialogue on it, but this is how I see it, is that realistically, to succeed as a technician, you're really a salesperson who has some soft technical skills. When what it used to be was we had technicians who had strong technical skills and we only needed them to have very soft communication skills. Now it really, if you're going to be the Brent Buckleys of the world, and Brent's a super awesome dude, I'm just using him as an example of success. If you're going to be the Brent Buckleys of the world, you really are a very advanced master communicator with some soft technical skills. And so just by definition of the category of work that we're in, there are a lot of tradespeople who that's not the kind of place they want to work. So they stay working in the environment where they're actually able to go out and be a technician. And
they just want to fix stuff. They just want to fix stuff, right?
Yeah. That's if it needs fixing, then that's what a technician does. A technician analyzes the what's broken, right, and fixes it. Now, we've been inconsistent in our ability to create the balanced approach. That balanced approach where you have a technician whose technical skills are sufficient for the ask of what they're doing, but also a communication process that can be employed at any time, in any situation, with any technician on site. Right now, we're still relying on that professional service representative they are the initiative person. So our business's initiatives are literally in the hands of those specific technicians.
Those three guys, right?
That's the modality.
I see it all the time. If I have a business and I have two good sales guys, then I got a great business. If one of them leaves, I'm scared. Well, I mean, what advice would you give guys to tomorrow's industry leaders about how to change the model or how to address the model to make the current model to make it better? I mean, what do you do about those technicians who want to fix things, not sell? And how do you fill that gap so guys can grow? What's your advice?
Well, so the first piece of it is we have to remember that the pioneers of innovation in this industry created what everybody else is trying to put their own flavor on today, okay? So most of the individuals that are in the industry today, they're not the authors of any of this. They learned it and they're executing on it. So you have to ask yourself, what is the characteristic of the individual who is, the people who are the innovators? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen company by company by company by company. If that was going to be the solution, then it would have already happened. So there has to be a different modality of communication. Right now, the modality of communication, and this has frustrated me for the last 20 years, was that the mode of communication about what we want done from a company philosophy standpoint in the interaction with a consumer experience, the modality was the technician. And so the very fractured and very fragmented consistency of being able to get that done has always plagued us, right? That's why, what you just said is true. You end up with a small handful of guys that are superstars and everybody else, kind of rides that second wave. The modality has to change. The only way that it's ever going to consistently work is if the modality changes. It's no different than any business that scales. Any business that really scales. Nobody scaled in our industry. So the idea of saying, "Oh, we're scaling," you're growing. Okay, scaling means that you are acquiring market share at such a significantly faster rate than any of your competitors are, that you are on a track to gain a predominant share of market, right? That's what scaling literally means.
Realistically, even the biggest guys, man, if they're at 8% market share, that's pretty strong.
In any one market, you start breaking them up against other marketplaces. Yeah, I mean, in other marketplaces, and you say, and again, nothing against a company that wants to go out and have 100 locations and be $1 billion in sales or whatever it is, right? I'm not criticizing that in any way. I'm just simply saying that even that $1 billion company in a $400 billion marketplace is 1/400. I mean, what's that decimal point, right? 0.004, right? So, or whatever it is. So you get my point. So why hasn't anybody scaled? With all the money, with all the drive, with all the knowledge, why? It's only one reason. We have not added a consistently adequate consumer experience, meaning the modality of communication to the customer and what's supposed to happen on that service episode. It won't ever be able to achieve that while we're continuing to do things the way that we're doing them now. So, which, if you start to think about what that means in the stages of industry, it means that, and I told you I'll send you this deck, is that the industry is moving past its maturity phase and starting to move into the decline phase, which means that the incumbent business model is ripe to be disrupted. And
this is a big topic here. I think, we've been talking for 20, 30 minutes now. That's a whole nother deep dive into, you're talking about some pretty serious stuff here. How do people get to that? How can people reach out to you to get things like that deck from your recent presentation?
Sure.
Because you're talking about some pretty deep stuff, right? Yeah, I'm gonna put it right here on the presentation.
Sure.
If you're willing to share that with people, right?
Yeah,
and it takes a lot of time because these are some pretty deep topics. There's a book here for you. You should write one. What is the future?
Yeah, I think you're right. And so you go, well, what makes you qualified, dude? Well, first of all, I don't know what makes one person qualified except for something that they can't stop thinking about, right? So there's a woman who I follow on LinkedIn. Her name is Kim Terrell, and she's, super successful entrepreneur. And she posted this thing that says that if you can't stop thinking about it, you should probably do it. So I don't know exactly what qualifies someone as an expert, but what I can tell you is that we've been studying, and I had a great mentor in Jim Abrams. The most meaningful mentor in my career that I had was Jim Abrams. I worked side by side with him for an extended period of time. I was the first company that ever merged together with Jim, as you said, way back when we first met. And I had the opportunity to work side by side with him, but that's not even really the issue. The issue was the quality of information that I was receiving in the quantity, not the quality, the quantity of information that I was receiving. Because today, through technology, we can even get better information, right? But the amount of information that we were getting at the time, it painted a picture. And so my thought process had kind of moved away from how do I get enough service calls on the board today? How do I, we talk about all the time, right? Working on your business and not in your business.
Right.
So I went from working in the business to working on the business to working on the industry, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's, these are some great topics. I encourage anybody that's listening to this and watching, going through this to reach out to Darren, because one of the benefits of a lot of experience is you get time to see what worked and didn't work, and I see some of the things that you're touching on. I see in the numbers. I think probably close to 70 of my customers this year and a half, have been bought by one of these national roll-ups. And as I look at the numbers, I don't always see a change after the acquisition. So that teases out the question of does scalability start to happen? To your point, right? There's other industries that once they hit scale, everybody else just goes away. Technology is famous for that, right? But you've got Uber and Lyft. Everybody else is dead, right? There are a lot of industry. When you go to an airport and you fly, there aren't 20 different rental car companies. There are 2 or 3, right?
Yep.
So I think that everybody here ought to probably reach out to Darren, click on the link to his site to get a little more feedback on it. And he's very gracious about sharing his time, coming to events and speaking. If he's at one, you guys ought to jump in and go into one of his breakout sessions where he's speaking. And I just appreciate you making this time available and maybe giving some of these younger guys something to really think about. Because to your point, information is really, really out there. So think about how much time you had to put in back in the Tom Hopkins days when guys like you and me were driving around feeding his cassettes into the deck of the car, right?
Yep.
And that was how you got your sales training.
That's
As
right.
opposed to everything is available 24 hours a day, digital. It's on YouTube. It's accessible. There are lots of groups that will promote it. Jim Abrams was the pioneer of that, but now other people want to recreate the magic and get the band back together. And you were on the original tour, right?
Yeah, I was one of the Beatles. So, it's, well, I appreciate and everything you're saying, and everything you're saying really resonates with me. It's, So consolidation, you talk about consolidation, right now I think that the young guns are really looking at the ability. Look, I don't want to generalize them because obviously every single one of them has a different purpose and what they want out of their lives, and so I don't want to generalize them. But what I will say is that I know from many of the conversations that I've had that they don't look at the industry and go, I just love this industry so much, I want to stay in it for the rest of my life. They look at it as, they look at it differently than we did. Like, we didn't have the exits that they had, right, the exit capabilities that they have today. I mean, realistically, if you can get your business up to that $10 million mark and you're making at least, 10 points of EBITDA on a annual basis, there's 15 different companies that'll write you a check for $15 million for that business. Okay, that didn't exist for us. We had to find how are we going to express our passion, and how are we going to express our entrepreneurialism, and how are we going to express our desire to grow something big in a different way. It wasn't just this opportunity to flip. So I don't think that some of the younger generation look at this as a lifelong mission, the way that some of us, some of the other older dudes like myself do. I think they go, hey, look, I can build a business and within 5 years I can sell it and I can have multiple millions of dollars and I can go on and pursue other things in my life. And maybe they will want to continue, a small group of them will want to continue to have an impact on the industry. Me, myself, my decision was that this industry was the rest of my life and that I was going to focus all of my effort and experience there. And in doing so, you see things through different lens. And when you see things through a different lens and you can understand enough history, you can predict the future quite accurately. And so, that's where we spend our time today. Today, we're focused on creating technological solutions that bring the basis of a contractor up to a level where it's not anymore about these secrets. It's not anymore about how can I execute to get my service technicians to offer maintenance agreements on every service order. Like and again, I'm not here to pimp Fixify, right? Like, we're here talking as buds, but that technology is what we needed then. And we needed a modality of communication that would consistently spit out the cheeseburger the exact same way, that the French fries would taste the exact same way, that the Coke mixture would taste the exact same way. And without it, McDonald's wouldn't be McDonald's. So their modality of delivery of that customer experience is what Ray Kroc saw that in that early business model, and then was able to take that and go out and literally create an industry with it, not just change an industry. He created an industry. McDonald's created an industry called fast food. And today they still own 25% of the world's fast food. That means put all the chicken things in there and all the taco things in there and all the everything, and McDonald's still owns 25% of the world's volume on fast food. That's scale, okay? That's scale. And just charging more and making more revenue, but not doing more transactions per capita. And this is something I really learned from you, my friend, because take it back to California when over at Right Time, when we really were talking about this topic a lot. Remember, and we were talking about these guys aren't going out there and they're not getting this long-term repeat business. They're just going in and they're hitting that customer. The most common thing that happens is on the very first visit that you see a customer on, they buy the new air conditioner. It's not this long-lasting, loyal relationship. Like, isn't it? So, there's nobody scaling today. Yeah, going out and buying a bunch of locations and not even getting to half of 1% is something that I think is creating a bubble, and which again makes everything ripe for disruption, and not disruption for disruption's sake, but disruption as the byproduct of reform. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, this is some deep stuff. But I think you're right. I forgot about Right Time. Yeah, I forgot about that years ago. I'm so old I forget things. And you look at the numbers and go, this isn't what's happening.
So what's going on now? I mean, you and I have seen the handwriting on the wall. You can't deny data. Data tells a story, and it draws a line, and that line says that technology is going to replace a big portion of what it is that today we're relying on technicians and their inconsistent ability to communicate. If we don't have to rely on that modality of communication for those very key essential pieces, now you're going to see a business model that is able to gain its profitability from consistency. So, can technology go out there and replace a Brent Buckley or a Dale Steele or some of these guys that are out there, just doing these phenomenal numbers? No. But the only reason that they are necessary is because of a lack of consistency across the rest of the data set. If you can gain consistency and bring the bottom up, those top performers no longer are essential to the organization. So that's our
which
focus.
is what the consolidators hope to accomplish. Now, whether they can do it is, like you said, that's not their life's work to stay in the industry. They're financial guys, right?
Yeah. You tell me. You tell me. Do you see? You just already said it. Do you see if the advantage that a PE has is so great, then explain to me and show me one location or one example in which, simply because of the fact that it's now part of a PE or a consolidated organization, that alone has caused that business to all of a sudden go in and gain a 25 or 30% market share. I mean,
yeah, the biggest one I've seen went from $5 million, and they're on track to do 40 in 2.5 years. But the infusion of money was there to address the staff issues, right? Fix the people.
I would challenge. Listen, I love $5 million to $40 million. Okay, but you think about that curve alone, and I promise you that there is some untold story in there that nobody wants to talk about, the dirty part of it, okay? When I say that, I mean I've watched things build that fast, and when you take something and you grow it that quickly, there's always damage associated with it, okay? Now, I don't know who you're talking about, so I'm not speaking specifically to them. I would venture to say that there was some other solution in there that was gained that doesn't have it wasn't the fact that it was a PE. It wasn't that. It was either access to some better management system or access to some better, as you say, maybe financial resource or something along those lines. But that's for one of those that you can name. How many more can we name that aren't that way? So
almost every other one you can't. Right. That's my point.
Right.
That's why it sticks out so much, because to your point, it just doesn't happen. But I think what we want to do is cut this off a little bit, and give everybody to reach out to Darren on the screen, and maybe I'll get him on the horn here again in a little bit for another event, because he's asking some really good questions. I know he's trying to address it from Fixify, and how to make the average guy better, and change the model of the industry. But he's definitely one of the kind of original gangsters, was there at the beginning. Fortunately, he's still active in it. Some of the guys like Ron Smith and others that really were there at the kind of dawn of the industry are no longer really with us, not able to do these kind of events, although I've interviewed Ron. But I just can't thank you enough for all the help you've given me over the past 15 or so years. And you're still a young guy, so you're still, you've got a lot of years left to support the industry because you love it. But
I love you for saying that too. Thank you. 52 doesn't feel as young as but I'm doing
well, it is.
Hey, listen, I appreciate you too, and you've helped us a lot too. And I've always appreciated the analytical approach that you took to the real information about the industry and how it's helped us. So, it's an ecosystem, and that's the way we look at it today, man. And we look at it as an ecosystem. And for so many years, we looked at it very myopically. I looked at the industry as, we got to get ours, and we got to protect ours, and we got to just do ours. But today, by looking at the industry as an ecosystem, there's solutions that are available to us that we didn't have before. So I appreciate you, and I appreciate you inviting me on, and I'm always willing to spend time going through this kind of stuff. So anything I can do to help anybody that's listening, or of course ever you, my friend, just reach out.
All right. Well, that kind of concludes this event, and please join us again. We're going to kind of have some other conversations with other guys like Darren and people like the young bloods that he talks about that are taking it to the next level and having a new perspective. It's a generational change. Like you said, it's an ecosystem, and that ecosystem includes people that are relatively new, people who are very experienced, different suppliers who also have a perspective, who people like ourselves that deal with our listeners and support them. And there's a lot to share and a lot to be thankful for. I mean, this is guys like Darren and myself, this industry's changed our lives for the better. And we're here to do whatever we need to do to help guys be more successful. So see us again, watch for other information, and we hope to be talking to you soon.
Awesome.